Welcome to I'm Not Joking, the podcast where a behavioral scientist examines what it's like to live a humorous life. Glimpse into the lives of the funniest people in entertainment, business, and science as your host, Dr. Peter McGraw, explores their habits, motivations, and secrets to success. Get ready to fire up your brain and your funny bone. Now, here's your host.
Welcome to I'm Not Joking, the podcast that looks at the lives of funny people. I'm Peter McGraw. Today's guest is Brandy Bryant. Brandy is a comedian and tattoo artist located in Denver, Colorado. She moved from Virginia at the beginning of 2018 to pursue comedy. And she's off to a good start with appearances on Lucha Libre and Laughs, the Boulder Comedy Show, and New Talent Night at Comedy Works. Welcome, Brandy.
Thank you for having me.
So, Brandy, if you weren't working as a comedian or as a tattoo artist, what would you be doing?
I'd probably still be delivering pizza.
Okay.
Yeah. Or making art for a living. I still do that in my free time.
Okay. So tell me about your pizza delivery days. I'm assuming in Virginia?
Yes.
Okay.
So, prior to tattooing, I delivered pizza while I was in college. It was like my part-time job.
Okay. Independent pizza shop or a...
No, it was a Papa John's.
Papa John's. Okay. How does that now make you feel knowing what a scumbag Papa John is?
I mean, I always thought the pizza was pretty terrible.
Okay.
And so it just reiterates that.
Uh-huh. So I've delivered papers. Okay. So I have delivered something in my life, I guess. I deliver lectures. Different,
that's similar.
Metaphorically, I guess. But is there some secret to being a good pizza delivery person?
Just being dead inside. That's
it. Just because it's just a grind?
It is. It's horrible. Low pay, long hours, wear and tear on you and your vehicle for very low compensation.
What kind of car were you driving?
It was a 95 Thunderbird.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a Frankenstein of a 94 and a 95 Thunderbird that I pieced together just for the job.
Oh, wow. That's exciting, though. And so wait, a Thunderbird is, what's the make?
It's a Ford.
A Ford Thunderbird, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay. You said 94, 95. All right. So this is kind of a big car.
It's, it had a V8 engine in it.
It had a V8 engine. Okay. So not exactly the most economical
No, it was not.
decision for a pizza delivery person.
It was all I could reach out and grab, though. It was what was available to me.
Okay. And so you're handy.
I try to be.
I mean, if you're piecing together a car.
Yeah.
That sounds handy to me.
I grew up in the South, so if you had car issues and you were poor and you didn't know how to fix a car, then you just didn't work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. I see.
So it was required learning.
I see. Okay. And how do you get you basically get two cars and put them together kind of thing?
Yeah.
All right. So how do you get both? How do you find a 94 and a 95 Ford Thunderbird?
Well, I had the 95 Thunderbird. That was my main car.
Okay.
The 94 Thunderbird, and I ended up having transmission and engine issues. And I got the 95 Thunderbird, which the rest of the car was ruined, but the engine and transmission were okay. And so I just kind of Frankensteined the parts together into one working vehicle.
Oh, that's impressive. And are you a car would you describe yourself as a car person?
Not at all.
No. So, but you have we just dropped the parking permit off to you. You have another American kind of muscle-y car.
Yeah,
no?
I keep getting those.
Okay.
I don't know what there is about that.
What is that? It would look like, I was like, is it a Dodger or is it a...
Yeah, it's a Dodge Charger.
Dodge Charger.
Yes.
Dodger.
A Dodge Charger. Yeah, that's good.
A Dodge Charger. Okay. And that's not a terribly Denver car.
No, it's not for this area at all.
Yeah. Is that the car you had from Virginia?
Yes.
Did you drive it out here?
Mm-hmm. I drove out here over 3 or 4 days.
Okay.
Just threw everything I had into the back seat and came out here.
Was it an impromptu decision? Was it a what do we call it? What's the right word for that? An impulse move?
No, it was planned.
Okay.
Yeah, my girlfriend lived out here, and I was wanting to pursue comedy, and it just seemed like the logical thing to do at the time.
Okay. So if your girlfriend wasn't here, might you have pursued comedy elsewhere?
It would have either been here, LA, New York.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then you said you might be working as an artist.
Yes.
So that's close. I mean, you're a tattoo artist, but what other type of art do you do?
Well, originally I went to school to do cartoon animation, and I ended up dropping out of that to tattoo. While I was delivering, I found a tattoo parlor that was looking for apprentices, and I delivered a pizza there one day, and I had my portfolio in the car, and I carried it in and showed it to the owner, and I pretty much had a job on the spot, and he was willing to pay cash money that day, like as soon as the apprenticeship was going. And I was like, do I really want to like stay in college for another 3 years and wait, or make money now?
I see.
So I jumped on the fast cash.
All right. So this pizza job wasn't all bad.
No, it led to some other things.
Yeah, that's right. Huh. So, okay. So you were studying how to be an animator.
Yes.
And so you have as a animator, you have a portfolio.
Yeah, I have a little bit of stuff on YouTube from back in my college days. But a lot of just traditional art, a lot of color pencil drawings and acrylic paintings.
Okay. And so I didn't know that tattoo artists became tattoo artists through apprenticeships.
Yes.
I mean, I guess it makes sense.
It varies from state to state. In Virginia, it's really intense. Like we have to get your apprenticeship going, you have to get certified in first aid and CPR, bloodborne pathogens handling. I think that's initially all you have to get started. And then to actually get licensed, you have to go take a state board exam in front of a panel of judges. And you have to pass like a written and practical exam.
Okay.
But then I come out here to Colorado.
To the Wild West.
And I applied at a tattoo shop, and they're just like, you don't have to do anything. The shop just says like, okay, this person is a tattoo artist. They vouch for you. There's no like formal apprenticeship that I can tell. So I'm like, I went through all of that for nothing, really.
I see.
I could have just come here and done the tattoo apprenticeship and not have to done any of that.
Has any of that come in useful though, working here?
Oh, definitely. I've had people like pass out in the chairs, black out. I had a guy have a seizure recently. So it definitely comes in handy, like knowing all that first aid stuff.
Okay. Yeah. So what percentage of people, there's like this kind of classic stereotypical story of someone getting drunk or altered in some way and deciding to get a tattoo.
Yeah.
How, is that a frequent thing?
So it actually doesn't happen as much as you would think.
Okay.
And when it does, we usually just like tell them like, you're obviously in no condition to be making permanent life choices like this. So you're going to have to come back another time.
I see. So you work at a reputable tattoo parlor.
Very
is it
reputable.
parlor? Is it okay to call it a parlor shop?
Both are acceptable.
Parlor's
I guess.
okay
Yeah.
still. Okay, I don't know. I am untattooed.
I didn't have any until I started tattooing, and I kind of bullshitted my way into it. They even called me on it. They're like, you don't even have any tattoos. And I was like, oh, I've always wanted tattoos, but I know the difference between good art and bad art, and the cheap stuff is just not good. I don't want garbage on me. And they're just like, yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
So I was able to get away with it.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm curious about the tattoo stuff. I mean, as someone who, I just never have thought to do. Some of it's generational. Like, it just wasn't a big thing when I was younger. And, I think what's interesting about, so certainly I like tattooing in the same way that I like fashion, in the same way that I like art.
Yes.
It's just, fashion is just wearing art on your body.
It really is.
And tattooing is just inking art on your body, and so the principles to me are the same, with the exception of the permanence side of it.
When one goes out of fashion, then you're just kind of stuck with it or have to cover it up.
Yes, that's right. And so, I guess that suggests that now, as a tattoo artist, how much input do you have in someone's choices?
I'll always try to steer them like in the best direction as far as like placement, composition. But at the end of the day, a lot of times people are just really hard-headed and want what they want.
They just want, yeah. It's their body, it's their
Yes.
money. So when you mean composition, what do you mean?
Well, a lot of times people will just come in with the worst designs. Like they're not balanced at all. The artwork is like it's very poor. And we'll try to talk them into letting us like redraw it for them so that it looks appealing to the eye. And a lot of times they're dead set on wanting that, and we'll either have to turn that down or pull it off as best we can, clean it up as we do the tattoo.
Yeah, I guess you're thinking about your brand in some way. Like,
yeah, you don't want to put your name on anything that's like less than the quality that you would normally put out.
Indeed. Now, so I have a question. I've never thought of this before, but so you're as an illustrator, as an artist, as someone who draws, you draw on a flat piece of paper or on a flat screen, in a 2-dimensional space. But as a tattoo artist, you are inking in a 3-dimensional space. Mm-hmm. And so how does that, I'm curious, does that change? Like, is there particular techniques because you're putting something on someone's shoulder or,
So that is actually something we have to take into account because you aren't tattooing a flat image. You're tattooing generally something that's cylindrical. So there is wrapping that goes on with the image. So there are times where you have to distort, extend, or contract certain parts of it so that when you're looking at it on the body, it looks right. So you'll show the actual drawing to the client, and it might look like stretched out or distorted on the sheet of paper, and you have to explain to them like, well, no, once it's on your body on this placement, once you look in the mirror, you'll see that it sits perfectly.
It wraps.
Yes.
Yeah, that's interesting. So how much more difficult is that to do?
There's a lot of work that goes into that. Yeah. There's a lot of eyeballing. There's some math. Anytime you're doing anything on the forearm that wraps all the way around and is supposed to meet, it's not a flat image at all. You're basically like drawing in a warped curve perspective.
Okay.
And it's really confusing. Even I've been tattooing for about 8 years now, and it's still a nightmare.
And these and so these sleeves have become a big thing where people basically get a tattoo from their wrist up to their deltoid.
Yes.
So that's hard to do.
Not usually, only if it's like something like an armband, for example, that's supposed to meet on the other side.
I see.
A lot of times, like if it's imagery, then we can just wing it and freehand it and piece it together as we go.
I see. So I'm planning on getting one of those barbed wire around my
You're about
bicep.
20 years too late.
Is that okay?
We're fresh out of barbed wire tattoos.
Is that going to come back?
I don't think so. I hope not.
Yeah, I bet you tattoos don't come back in the same way that like other fashion does.
I mean, traditional tattoos have really made a comeback with the bold lines and the very limited color palette.
Okay.
Like the American traditional tattoos. I don't know if you're familiar with those.
I'm not. So what would be an example of like a traditional American tattoo?
If you ever like think of like soldiers going to war back in like World War II, and they would get the battleships and the big eagles on their chest, like hard lines, bold colors, things like that. Not a lot of like variance or no variance in line weight. So it's just like one consistent bold line throughout the entire image, and usually very patriotic stuff, pinup ladies, moms with hearts, that stuff. That's American traditional.
And then, and so that's making a little bit of a comeback.
It is.
Oh, interesting.
I'm not sure it ever went away. I think people just like wanted to try new things with tattooing, and that's when they started getting into like the realism and illustrations.
I see. What's interesting is I don't even know what questions to ask. Because
as far as tattooing?
Yeah, because I don't know that much about it. Like I can't say I've ever.
Well, I'm by no means an expert.
Well, in this room you are.
Okay.
Okay, so you started off as kind of a more traditional graphic digital artist.
Yes.
But you still do that.
I do. Yes.
You have So tell me a little bit about the evolution of that. So you said you have some cartoons on YouTube from when you were a student. Mm-hmm. What are those like?
So they're not even so much like, they don't have any sort of a narrative to them. They're just like practicing walk cycles and background pans, things like that. I never actually put it into anything like more than that. So this cartoon was actually applying everything that I've learned since I started practicing animation when I was about 12 or 13.
This is your new project?
Yes.
So we were chatting about this before we turned on the mic. So this is called Life After Death.
Yes.
This sounds comedic.
It is. It's very out there.
Okay. And is there a main character?
So there's a few main characters. It's basically about this zombie who's come back to life, and he has no memory of his life before dying. And his best friend is the one who resurrected him. at least he's led to believe that it's his best friend. It's this bunny rabbit that is inhabited by the spirit of a demon.
Okay.
And is manipulating him for his own means, but they are friends. And it's really just about like how far would you go to find yourself, and would you really like the person that you find out that you were?
Oh, interesting. So it's like he's like sleuthing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And does he have a name?
So the main guy, the zombie, his name is Harvey.
Okay.
And the bunny rabbit character,
the frenemy,
yes, is Bob, which is he says it's short for Beelzebub.
I see.
Yeah.
I see.
But we'll find out that he's not as big a deal as he builds himself up to be. He's very insignificant.
Okay. This is fascinating. And so it's certainly fun to, I mean, I'm thinking of the, these sort of, obviously zombies are kind of a big thing, or turned into a big thing.
Yes, they've really blown up lately, haven't they? With Walking Dead and
I've only watched one episode of The Walking Dead, and that felt like enough for me. But I did enjoy Zombieland and 28 Weeks Later.
Yes.
And then Shaun of the Dead was obviously comedic.
I've enjoyed all of those. Shaun of the Dead is probably one of my favorites as far as like the zomedy goes.
Zomedy, okay, yeah, nice. And so you're working on basically creating a pilot, a version of this. And so what does that look like? Are you doing this by hand, or are you doing this by computer? How are you doing it?
It's going to be like hand drawn and into the computer. So it's like Adobe Animate is what I'm using. So it'll be a combination of like hand drawn digital assets and Flash components, where like you basically cut out an image and move it around, and then you hand draw parts of it.
Okay. And so you're fitting that in between being a tattoo artist, and you're a fairly new comic.
Yes, I'm coming up on a year in January.
Okay. So I don't, you probably don't even know how I found you.
I know. I've looked at the people you've had on here, and it's just like, it's all the like pros in Denver, and I'm like, why me?
Why? Well, so I can answer that question. So my only criterion for this podcast is that I interview a funny person. So you qualify.
Well, thank you.
I stumbled somehow. I can't even tell you exactly how, but I stumbled on a clip of you. You have a 5-minute clip on YouTube.
Yes.
And I thought it was really good.
Thank you.
I thought it was good, and it felt different for reasons that I'm sure the audience will find out momentarily. And I was like, oh, I wonder if she'll talk to me. And so I reached out to a mutual friend, or at least maybe a mutual acquaintance. But
yeah, Janae, right?
Janae Burris,
yes.
Who was like...
Yeah, she's really cool. She's a good girl.
She might have been my second or third guest on here. Mm-hmm. And I asked if she would make an introduction. And so, so as someone who studies humor, I have this theory of what makes things funny, the idea that people laugh at things that are wrong yet okay, what we call benign violations. And I think what I liked about your comedy is you use big violations.
Very big.
They're very big. And as a result, when you get a laugh, you get big laughs.
Yes.
Like, I think you get big laughs. I mean, I know the clips I saw, those are not big rooms. Like, it's not like they're packed, huge rooms, but I can tell you're getting big laughs.
The Syntax shows, I have 2 clips from there, and there's probably around maybe 30 to 50 people at those.
Yes. Okay.
I have one that I just added from Comedy Works. I have no idea how many people that place seats, but I think it was sold out that night.
That's a big room, and that's a loud room because it's a great room.
It's huge, and it's in that basement, so it just echoes. It's very loud.
I recently went to a show there, and I was, they do everything right. They pack people in. It's dark. The ceilings are low. It's set up to be a great room. Actually, when I was working on the Humor Code with my co-author, Joel Warner, we did an article about the best comedy rooms in the country. And we asked various comedians we knew, what are the best rooms? And we asked Adam Caton Holland, a Denver comic alum,
Mm-hmm.
and he obviously pointed out Comedy Works is, and it might be arguably the best room in the country. You can make your case for it.
I only have the local scene to compare it to, so it's definitely up there.
It's great to be doing that.
Yeah.
So before we get into that, so Denver, so you have a girlfriend here, but also I think it's a great town to begin comedy. Has that been your experience?
Yes, I actually did my research online, and everybody was like, if you're just starting out and you want to take comedy seriously, go to Denver. It's a good place to get started. There's like mics almost every night. If you're good, they'll book you. So I was just like, okay, let's do that.
Okay. And where do you find this out? Like, is there how do you go online and figure out that Denver's a great?
There's Facebook groups that I joined. I was in Virginia at the time, so I was just asking around locally in those groups. And for the majority, they were like, as far as affordability and versus comedy scene, everybody overwhelmingly said Denver.
Yes.
They were like, stay away from New York and LA until you're ready to go pro.
Right. I talked to Joe Rogan about this a while ago, about when do you make the move?
Mm-hmm.
And his belief is you get 20 good minutes and then you make the move, kind of thing. And I sort of felt like you make the move when you're kind of ready, in the sense of,
right,
how good are the 20 minutes, or you know what I mean, like what kind of chops do you have, and what kind of opportunity might you be able to develop? Because I think that those places they'll chew you up if you're not, and you only have one chance to make a first impression.
That's right,
to be the new person. And so if you're going to do it, you might as well make sure you're well prepared, in that sense. And so it's lived up to your expectation?
Honestly, I thought I would come out here and just do open mics for a year and like maybe get a laugh here and there, but I still haven't even hit a year yet, and I get booked on more shows than I can keep up with right now.
That's great.
I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting for the first year to just bust my ass and just like write terrible jokes, and it's actually been the opposite.
Yeah, that's great. Well, as I said, I thought you were good. So that's why you're getting booked on shows.
Yes.
You've got good jokes.
And I'm still just like in awe. Like every time someone messages and asks like, do you want to do this show? And they're like, we can't pay. And I was like, I don't care. I'm just grateful for the opportunity. I'll do anything that you throw at me right now.
Yeah. And so at what point do you think you'll start saying, no, you need to pay me?
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I get paid on a few of the shows, but mostly it's just you get paid in beer tickets.
Right. Right. Yes. Further making comedy a difficult lifestyle.
Yes.
So I was saying your jokes have big violations. So and you agreed readily.
Yes.
Why? Why do you agree with that?
Because being trans is very taboo.
Mm-hmm.
It may be more acceptable now than it was in the past, but it's still not widely accepted at all.
And so you make a lot of jokes about transitioning.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely going to address the elephant in the room.
Mm-hmm. So, did the comedy stuff come first, or the trans come first?
I'm not sure. I've known I was trans. I knew something wasn't right as early as I can remember. Probably around 3 or 4 years old. I could feel. There wasn't a word for it, but I knew that something wasn't right. And I've probably been the class clown just as long.
Okay. Yeah. So you got into a car accident in Denver.
Yes.
And you have a joke about this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's so. Do you mind?
Oh, no, I don't mind at all.
Yeah.
I love doing it. It actually offends a lot of people, feminists especially.
What did you say? What especially?
Feminists.
Feminists especially.
Yes.
Okay.
But it's true. I didn't have my first car wreck ever until moving out here into Denver, and I didn't have a car wreck prior to transitioning.
Yes.
So I guess that just goes to show that women really are terrible drivers.
Yes, and so that gets both a laugh and
some gasps.
Some gasps.
Yes.
Yes. Has anybody ever tried to talk to you about that joke, or?
I've never been confronted on that one. No.
No. Yeah, it's. I mean, look, I see it plays on taboos.
Yes.
And stereotypes and so on, and so it's I like when comics can pull a joke like that off because, and it's fun. You don't quite see it coming, I think is a nice one. It makes sense once you hear it.
And I've always like ascribed to George Carlin's teachings where he was just like, if you can legit make it funny, then you can joke about anything. There really shouldn't be anything that's off limits. And there's a lot of people now who are like trying to censor what you can and can't joke about, and like I really don't agree with that.
Yes.
When you start like putting restrictions on things you can't talk about, where does it end? Eventually you'll be left with nothing to joke about, to make fun about.
Well, especially because the things that are most taboo are often good. Like it's often a good topic, right? Yes. Because you have the thing that's wrong. You're
already setting it up for that.
That's already there. It's already titillating. It's already scary. It's already, in that, I have the luxury as a non-comic of being agnostic when it comes to this issue. All I can do as a scientist is sort of point out that there seems to be these two schools of thought. And I see reasons for both of them. So one is I like Key and Peele say, make fun of everything. And George Carlin is a subscriber to this idea. Like there's nothing off limits. The comedy is made to go to these dark places and to deal with these difficult topics.
Exactly.
And the comedy club is a special safe place in the same way that a classroom isn't, or a church isn't, or
it's very
a town hall, political town hall isn't, and so on.
Yes.
The alternative perspective is the idea, I think, that that one is that comedy can do damage. It can be a weapon, and thus, as a weapon, it should be yielded for good, so to speak.
And I can understand that.
Yeah, at least maybe not even for good, but like a kind of a do no harm perspective,
right,
of comedy. So the idea is, if you punch up. If you're going to, I think the classic is if you're going to make jokes about a gay lifestyle, then make fun of the homophobes, not the homosexuals. This kind of idea, which is like, and then, but that is one that now there are tastemakers, gatekeepers, decision makers who go, no, that's not okay. And other people who say, okay, that's all right. You're doing it well here. You're not doing it well here. But so you're more of the former, which is.
Yes. Well, I definitely think that you should be allowed to joke about anything, but I also don't think that I also think that if you say some really offensive shit, and then you're going to have to deal with the consequences of that, and you might have to adjust what you're writing, your material, your performance. I don't think you should just go out there and just like aggressively attack anyone, but at the same time, I don't think anything should be off the table.
I see. Yeah. To me, I think the issue is if you choose topics that are off the table, now you're not giving the comic. You don't see the comic as artist, which is the ability to take something that's seemingly taboo and see what they can do with it. Right? That's to me and the problem, of course, is there's a lot of comics who aren't truly artists. They're hacks. And so
there's some of that.
So they don't have the skills or the perspective or the ability or the inclination to take their jokes to those, to that second, third, fourth step, which is away from the non-obvious hacky stuff and into the things that are Carlin-esque, which are, often more subtle and less obvious, in that way. You have an abortion joke.
I have a few abortion jokes.
You have a few abortion jokes,
yes.
Right. So I've seen one that you close with.
I'm trying to think.
About there's like a procedure.
Yes, that one.
Okay. So I can't tell. It would be bad for me to try to say this. So what's the hook?
This really is a thing. They're working on this procedure to give trans women like myself a functioning womb and ovaries and the whole like reproductive system of a female so that we can actually have kids of our own. And I think that's really exciting because I would love to experience the joys of abortion.
I'm
just combining all the taboos into one there.
Just put it all together. Yeah. And that gets, big laughs and big gasps.
It does.
It does. And that, so you're closing with that, or you have closed with it.
When I do the shorter sets, I've closed with that a few times. I have a lot of stuff that I close with. I'll use experiences going to the doctor. Like those can be fun.
Okay.
Especially when they don't know, like when they just look at you, they don't know right away that you're trans. And so there's always some humor and levity in that situation.
And do you play it up? Like when you go to the doctor and the doctor's perplexed or misinformed, do you have kind of fun with the doctor, or
I do.
Do you keep it serious?
It's a balance. I mean, like I'm at the doctor because there's something serious going on, but I will still like let my humor infiltrate the situation if I can.
Yeah.
If I see a opening for it.
As a way to, is this like as a way to kind of just like smooth the interaction a little, or just to have fun? Just
a little of both, really.
Okay.
Like I'm probably like the least serious person in any situation.
Okay.
So yeah.
You're less serious than me right now, so that's good. So your joke writing, not all of it's focused on being trans.
No.
What other types of topics do you like to talk about?
Well, I also have kids, so I get a lot of stuff from that. The tattooing, I pull from that as well. And then just general life experiences. Like if I'm out in public and I see things or notice something that is worth commenting on or have an experience, I'll try to use that. And then there's just like the one-liners that just come to you out of nowhere. You just come up with some random off-the-wall stuff.
Mm-hmm. And so how do you do like this this kind of observational style of comedy? How do you do, like, do you have a system? Do you, what makes you good at that?
I carry a joke book with me everywhere I go.
Do you have it
just,
with you?
I do actually. It's out in the car.
Okay.
But yeah, it's pretty close.
Uh-huh.
And if I see something that I think there could be something like a premise or a joke in there, I'll make a little note of it and go home and just kind of sit there and write for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, however long it takes to get material out.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll read through that and just see if there's anything worth punching up.
I see. And do you have like a writing practice that you follow?
I try to like get up every morning and write something, even if it's just a one-liner that gets no laughs.
Mm-hmm.
But I
did
mind
you
a lot
this morning?
I did.
What'd you?
I don't even remember.
Okay.
You know what? I could find out real quick though. But we can keep talking while I look for it if you want.
You check your phone on that. Yeah.
They're just so throwaway. Oh, and I remember what it was now. And a lot of the stuff too, I'll pull from, or I'll just dig into my past and find things like looking back on it now, how it could be funny. And my grandfather was a descendant of the Powhatan Indians in Virginia, and my grandmother is a descendant of Jesse James, the cowboy, the outlaw.
I see where you're headed with this already.
And so when I was a kid, like I could get away with playing cowboys and Indians all by myself.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah,
that's fine. That's a nice premise.
It's not a great joke, but I mean it's true, and that's where I get a lot of stuff from, is just digging into the past. And
yeah. Well, it's not. It may not be a great joke yet, right? If
it's definitely not yet, but I could punch that up and add tags to it and elaborate with scenarios.
Mm-hmm. And build that out.
Definitely. I could probably turn that into about 5 minutes of material if I really wanted to sit there and just play with it.
Mm-hmm. And how do you determine, like, will you do that no matter what, or will you make a determination like, oh, that's a nice premise, but...
So usually what I'll do is I'll take all this crap that I write and I'll just throw it on a sheet of paper or something, and I'll go to the open mics and I'll just rattle off a list. And if anything gets a laugh, I'll just put a little check next to it, and that's like, okay, you can try to develop that one further. And if I try a joke a few times and it's not really getting any laughs, then I'm just like, okay, you're not worth worrying about, and I'll just brush it aside. Okay.
And do you have like a joke graveyard? Like, do you keep these things somewhere? Or
yeah, there is a huge stack of just balled up paper next to my desk.
Okay.
It's filed away. Like, I don't want to throw it away because like maybe in the future I can dig into it and rework some of it.
This Joan Rivers documentary that, I don't know, it might be 10 years old or so. I thought it was really fabulous. She had bought like a those library card catalog kind of.
Like the Dewey Decimal System
Yeah,
drawers.
yes. She had the drawers and everything, and so she would put these jokes on little like 3x5 cards and file them.
A literal filing system.
Literal filing system for all of
That's incredible.
her work. I mean, I think a lot of people the folks who listen to this podcast, I think do know these things, but I don't think the average person really understands the process that goes into creating stand-up comedy.
There's a lot of work. I wish I could just go up there and just be naturally funny, but I don't know if anybody can they? Like, if you took all their jokes away from them and told them, like, you can't use anything you've ever written, now go be funny. Like, is that even a thing?
Maybe Dave Chappelle.
I'd believe that.
Maybe Dave Chappelle. I hate to bring this up. Maybe Bill Cosby could have done that before.
Before.
Not now, obviously.
No, not now.
Yeah, no. But
how about them pudding pops?
Dave Chappelle, I think, is a mutant. I just think that he launched 2 Netflix, I think, simultaneously. And in one of them, he said, I've never heard a comic say this before, stand-up comedy is so easy for me that I need to find ways to make it challenging. So I just write punchlines.
Yes.
Put them in a bowl and then pull out the punchlines and then figure out the setups for those.
I heard that one. That was incredible.
Yeah. Now, like, was that bit, like, he closes with that. It's not like, it's not an outstanding joke, but it's, he still gets a laugh. I mean, that guy is, he has something.
Yes, I agree.
That allows him to just get up on stage and talk, where he can thread the needle in a way that most people can't. But after that, I'm not sure. I'll be honest, I'm not sure. I actually think that the funniest stand-up comedians are even more process-oriented than the less successful stand-up comedians.
I would have to agree with that.
Yeah, I think like so.
I have one that is a personal favorite of mine that I think he could probably pull it off as well, is Rowan Atkinson, Mr. Bean.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. Okay, that's fair. Certainly, yeah. I mean, I think given that the man's able to get laughs without saying anything,
just without a word, he can just elicit a laugh. Yes. I think he could pull it off.
That's an interesting point, Mr. Bean. Nice. So, so you're off to a good start.
So far.
What's that?
So far.
But what has been difficult?
My memory. My memory is the worst.
Okay. So how does that hurt you?
Just as far as like remembering my jokes, my material, my ordering, like what I want to talk about.
I see.
It takes a lot for me to finally commit a bit to memory.
Okay.
To where I can just recall it on stage.
And how do you do that?
I just one is just to go to the open mics as often as I can, which is not as much as what most of the comedians are doing, because the tattooing does run into the hours that most open mics happen. Yeah. And so that's unfortunate. But I rewrite my jokes over and over and over. So I have stacks of paper, like, a foot tall on my desk, where I've just rewritten the same joke over and over and over, like a kid with a chalkboard in school when they're being punished. That tends to help.
Okay. I feel your pain. So I give public talks, and the best ones that I give are ones where I write out everything that I'm going to say and then memorize it well enough that it doesn't seem like it's memorized.
Yes. I end up doing that a lot, so I can totally relate.
And that's hard. I got a tip about a good way to memorize these things. I don't know if it would help with stand-up comedy at all, but it's like the idea essentially is to I write a talk out in blocks. I mean, by the way, most of the professional talks I've done, I haven't done this, but when I do it well, that's what I do. And I basically memorize the first block, which is maybe a few sentences, and then so that I can then just say it out loud without without looking at a sheet of paper.
Right.
Then I memorize the second block. Then I say both of them out loud. Then I memorize the third. Then I say the first, the second, and the third, and so on. Which, it's not trivial if it's a long, if it's a long talk kind of a thing.
That sounds very similar to what I'm doing, actually.
Okay.
I'm doing that, but I'm basically trying to build a story with all these different jokes and piece them together in a way that might make a narrative.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still trying to figure that out. I'm not quite there, but in my mind, like they all relate to each other.
Yeah,
in
that
some
makes
ways.
sense. Yeah, I get it. I mean, certainly with a talk, you're having to, kind of the easiest format for a talk is an opener, some introduction, a promise, right? So what you're going to get from this thing. Then section 1, section 2, section 3, and a close. Like that's kind of the format for a typical talk that I want to do. It's fluent. It's easy for the audience to follow. Mm-hmm. You go deep enough into one thing that people feel like they get enough meat, but then you don't spend all the time on it where they're like, okay, I get it.
Yeah, we get it. Let's move on.
I think that the complexity of putting together a stand-up set can be much deeper than that, or not deeper complexity, but greater complexity.
It can, because there's like so many different things to talk about. Whereas like if you're giving a speech on
one topic, typically.
Exactly.
Yes.
Like there's only like that one path, but with comedy you can branch off in almost literally any direction. So you have to rein it in a little and try to figure out what you want to talk about in your allotted time.
Do you do any crowd work?
I've never tried crowd work. I've had a few hecklers that I've dealt with, but that's about it.
Okay. How do you deal with hecklers?
What are we allowed to get away with as far as what we can say on this podcast?
I have comics on here all the time, so it has an E explicit rating.
I have a ball gag in my pocket that I'll gladly use to shut them up,
Okay.
Yeah. 2 ball gags, actually.
That's fun. And when you do you get heckled in any particular way when you've been heckled? Is a trans thing
It's usually a trans thing,
It
yeah.
is, yeah.
Somebody actually just the other day went on my YouTube channel and downvoted all the videos and was leaving comments saying, "You are a man, sir." And I'm like, did you not watch the video? Like, I talk about transitioning, and I replied back to him kinder than I should have. I believe I said something along the lines of, "It's not my fault that your penis is smaller than mine."
Okay.
And I'm sure you're doing the best you can with what God gave you.
I see. That must be a puzzle in terms of how to deal with trolls.
It can be. Some people just don't even address them at all.
Yeah, they just ignore them. I've only had one troll experience, and actually it was after being on Joe Rogan. He has some kind of, let's say, less than desirable people who are fans. I mean, he has a lot of great fans, but that was the only time that I had people really talk shit about me in a very public kind of way. I just chose to ignore it.
And he has a lot of attention on him too, so I'm sure you definitely picked up some of that.
Some of it, yeah. Well, I wasn't at my best. I honestly walked in there not knowing what to expect, and I in hindsight should have been more prepared for it. Like, I had no idea it was going to be a 3-hour conversation.
Yeah, his podcasts run pretty long.
They run super long. So, that your story reminds me of, did you ever hear the story about Sarah Silverman? Like, I think there was this great exchange she had. There was some dude who was just being a jerk to her. And I forget exactly how it came up, but she essentially, like, she talked about having back pain. I guess he had some problem, some back problem or something like that. And she responded in this very compassionate, mindful way about, I've had back pain before. Does it sound familiar?
Yeah, it's finally clicking. I've heard this one, yes.
Right? It was on Twitter. I
Yes.
think it was on Twitter kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it ended up being like this really, like, she essentially brought this guy around.
They ended up connecting on a really deep level, and it started out with a personal attack.
Yes, that's right.
I really admired that. That was awesome.
Yeah, I thought that was great too. I thought it was her ability to look past his aggressiveness and see that it was rooted in pain,
yes,
rather than in hatred. I thought was really sweet, and I've never met Sarah Silverman, but I could easily see how she could have
gone the other way with it, yes.
Especially, if you, I think.
And that would have been so easy to do, but she took the higher road. And I do believe that a lot of people who act out like that, they are hurt. They they don't understand what it is they're attacking. Anything that's different, they'll jump on.
I think actually the more experience that I get in the world with people who are kind of either come off really cocky and brash, and often kind of look sort of, academia has plenty of them, let me just say, or people who are being really aggressive and saying really shitty things, especially on social media. It's easy to sort of ascribe that behavior to the fact that they're just bad people, insensitive people and so on and so forth.
There's definitely some of those out there. Indeed,
yeah, there are. But I think a lot of these folks are in pain. They're insecure, they're in pain, things aren't going well, and this is a kind of misguided attempt.
They're lashing out at just anything.
To overcome this, to appear to be a strong person or whatever. And I actually think that oftentimes the people who actually are the most powerful people can afford to be the kindest. They don't have to be mean and to do these things that they're more like shepherds in the sense of the world.
Yeah, I'll agree with you there.
Yeah. And I actually think that this notion of how comedians deal with hecklers is actually an interesting way to think about this idea. So, if you, as a comedian, especially the more advanced someone gets, the more experience they get. So, you're a year in, but imagine 10 years from now, the amount of confidence you'll have stepping onto a stage. You already strike me as someone who's pretty confident up there already, but
I definitely still get nervous up there.
Yeah.
But I'm more comfortable now than I was a year ago.
Yeah, and that should continue, And
hopefully, I hope it doesn't start reverting.
No, I don't see any reason why it would, especially if you continue to have success, building your craft. So one thing I think is cool about is a good, strong, confident comedian will handle a heckler and will be hard on that person. But the reason they do it is for the good of the rest of the audience.
Yes, just for the laugh in that moment.
That's right.
You're on the spot.
So they transition from being you're attacking me, I'm going to destroy you because you're trying to hurt me,
yes, to
this idea of I can't allow you to behave like this because these good people in the audience have paid good money and are, are here to have fun, and they're not here for that.
You have an obligation while you're up there to be funny, and digging into their past, trying to find their trauma and connect with them probably isn't going to be very funny. You're probably not going to get a lot of laughs doing that. So you just go and just dig for the funny material. And
deal with it and then move on.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. So I wanted to ask you a couple other quick questions. So do you feel like you've had a big insight at all? You're a year in. Mm-hmm. Have you felt like you've had kind of an aha moment when it comes to this craft that has helped you a lot? Or a little?
I don't know. I'm still figuring things out. I mean, I definitely know how to write a joke now. Just whether or not that joke's going to be the best thing I've ever written, it's hard to say. Mm-hmm. Whereas even just a year ago or 2 years ago when I was just writing, I would just throw some stuff together and just see if it got a laugh and just hope for the best. Mm-hmm. Whereas now I know okay, there's a setup and then there's a delivery and there's a punchline, and you can do story format, you can do one-liners. So I've definitely learned a lot in the year that I've been doing it.
So So the notion, like when you're talking about how to write a joke, you're talking about like the structure of a joke.
Yes.
And the beats and please.
I only learned that recently. Like I was just coming up with life experiences and just relating to whatever the subject might be. So I was doing it without even realizing that I was doing it. I guess that would be the aha moment where I realized like, oh, there is a structure to this nonsense that you've been doing.
Yeah, I think that's like a common mistake for new comics. So these, most new comics are funny people in their own way, naturally. Like they have some good instinct. Mm-hmm. They've been encouraged to, it's very rare, I think, that someone has, no comedy chops and is like, I'm going to become a stand-up comedian. Usually there's like, you're the class clown, you're the funny one in the group, you were the funny one around Thanksgiving table, and so there's been encouragement and good feedback that makes someone go, hey, I'm funny enough, I can do this kind of thing. It strikes me that oftentimes those people, when they get up on stage, they don't realize that the funniness around the Thanksgiving table,
it's a totally different scenario than being on stage by yourself.
So they try to tell some stories. I mean, they try to tell funny stories
with no punchlines, and they go nowhere.
That's right.
It's one of those like you would have had to have been there moments. It's not really funny to retell.
Yes, and the audience doesn't care in the same way that the people around Thanksgiving.
They really don't care because it's not their family. They don't know you. They don't give a shit.
Yes, and they're expecting a joke of some sort, and they're getting this kind of.
Instead, it's like, oh man, my Uncle Jeff, like he did this thing. That's so him. And then you're just like, well, I don't know your fucking uncle.
Right. Yeah. So you already kind of were naturally able to kind of structure jokes, and then you start figuring out, and so. I mean, how deeply do you go into this like format for joke writing?
Not at all.
Okay.
I don't use it at all. I mean, I'm aware of it, but I just try to find the whatever experience or event that happened recently and just craft it in a way that's funny. Mm-hmm. Like if I go to the grocery store and see something that amuses me, or go to the doctor and the doctor isn't aware that I'm trans. Mm-hmm. You'll adjust the truth here and there, maybe add something that didn't happen. So a lot of the stuff that I do come up with, it's like a blend of like real life and fiction. Okay.
Yeah, I think, I always like to laugh whenever a comedy goes, on my way over here tonight, I'm like, well, this is about to be made up. Like that may have happened a year ago, but it did not happen on the way over here tonight.
It's always the other day.
The other day. Last week. Yeah, yes. That's right. Yeah, just recently.
Always just recently, no matter how long ago it was. Yeah.
Now, have you been retiring jokes? Do you have some things that you already go?
I've retired stuff that in the beginning I thought was funny, and as I've moved on, I'm like, it's not
as strong.
No. But I'm actually still using some of the bigger jokes from the beginning because they still get laughs, and I don't really know like how long you should tell a joke before you retire it. I've wondered about that.
Can I give you my reaction?
Please.
So this is easy. This stuff's easy for me to say because I don't have to write jokes every day. I think that the traditional established way is you do something with them that is big. Mm-hmm. You do a special, you do an album, you do something like that, and then you set them aside and you start new stuff, right? So that's the classic.
Right.
I've got a buddy, Will Anderson. He was on the podcast before. He's this Aussie comic, total pro. He does a show. He does a new show every year. He does the Australian comedy circuit.
Yes.
And
I'm familiar with that one.
Yes. So,
I mean, I haven't done it, but I'm aware of it.
It's it's a great place to develop your chops and to experience life. It's fun down there, and great audiences, funny people, and they legitimately pay comics. So you can actually make
more than beer stubs, right?
Yes,
beer tickets.
You can make a living as a comic in Australia in a way that's much harder in the U.S., I think. So for him, like him, he just does, he does, all his shows are named after him. So like, I can't even think. There's hundreds of them now, or 50 of them, and then you just move on to new stuff.
Right.
As a new comic, the worry, of course, for me, my worry for new comics is that they use their jokes the jokes that they have as a crutch.
Yes. The ones they know are going to get a laugh every time, they'll keep reusing those. And I'm doing it. I mean, I am.
No, yeah, that's fine. It's not that. It's just how long you reuse them, right? So
yeah,
right. So if I see a comic and then 2 years later they're telling the same jokes, I'm just like, they're not really working on their craft. Because if they were working on their craft, they'd write better jokes.
Exactly.
And then what you do is you just retire, like you did already. You retire jokes that either they're not as funny as your new stuff, or they're not working for you in the way that they ought to work for you, because that's not the kind of comedy you want to do. That's not the kind of topics you want to, there's an evolution. And so I think as long as you're adding new stuff, then that allows you to then either pick and choose or just go, oh, I'm not going to do that stuff anymore. I'd say like probably about 25% of the jokes that I do right now are stuff from the beginning, like a year ago, or in January a year ago. Yeah.
So hopefully by like February, March, it could be down to just 10% of those.
Yes, right.
Because like I'll try to like reuse the jokes that do get laughs that I know are gonna make people laugh. I'll use that as like an opener and a closer, and I'll take the new stuff that I'm working on memorizing and try to like squeeze it in the middle somewhere, like sandwich it in there, until I've gotten to the point that I've memorized it to the point where I can just recall it on stage, and I feel like I'm pretty good with it and pretty happy with it. And then once that's to that level, then I'll take an older joke out, and then that'll take its place, and then I'll work a new bit in there that I'm trying to polish up and memorize.
That sounds great to me. I mean, it sounds right. It sounds like, you're at the stage where that's, you have the luxury of having enough good material that you can start strong and end strong, and that you're just working on your craft. I would say you're not anywhere near that world that I was critiquing, which is person who's 3 years in. And,
I'm a little itty bitty baby in the comedy world.
Yeah, that's fine though. I mean, that's exciting. I think it's really exciting.
I know, I love it. It's awesome.
Yeah, I could tell you're excited about it. Last question. What are you reading, watching, or listening to that really stands out to you?
Right now, not a lot of anything. Okay. I've been so caught up with between working and tattooing, trying to get to the open mics, and working on this cartoon that there's really not a lot of time for anything else.
Consumption.
Yeah, I will put on some Netflix specials or any stand-up comedy specials to have as like noise in the background while I work.
No, that's cool.
But yeah, that's really it. I've recently started listening to podcasts, so I'll pull those up and have those playing while I work.
So I actually think, first of all, that's a fine answer. And it's especially fine answer because I think there's a balance in between consumption and creation. And I think it's easier to consume than create.
It is. It takes zero effort to consume, and to create is like the hardest thing ever.
It's really challenging. It sounds like you're doing a lot of creation between those 3 parts of your life.
I'm trying. My girlfriend even tells me I'm doing too much. She goes, "You need to just focus on either the comedy or the cartoon."
I see.
There's not enough time in the day for everything.
It's I get it. It's funny. Someone was just asking me about my work, and I said my big complaint, it's not much of a complaint, is I just can't find enough time to do all the projects that I'm excited to be working on. So, that's a good problem. Now,
oh, definitely. There are worse problems you could have, like, oh man, I don't know which Netflix series to binge next.
Right, exactly. So I actually have a book recommendation for you.
Okay.
I don't know if I've ever given a book recommendation at this point in the podcast. It's called Moonwalking with Einstein, and it's a book about memory. And so it might.
That's not what I thought it would be about.
Yeah. So no, I know. Well, so it's a very fun book. It's about a journalist who started doing an article about these memory athletes. So these folks who will memorize the order of a deck of cards in a minute or less.
The savants, yes.
Yeah. Well, so what's interesting is what he discovers. Foer is his last name, Foeher, something like that. I'll put it in the notes for the podcast. What he realizes is that these folks, they may have some natural ability in the same way that you're kind of naturally funny. They have a technique that they use, and it's called a memory castle, basically. And what they do is they essentially in their mind, they create a journey through a very familiar place, usually like a childhood home. Okay. And then they create associations with the things that are at these different locations, at the mailbox, at the front door, at the landing, at the top of the stairs. And then they create an association with whatever it is that they want to memorize. And so the moonwalking with Einstein is like, he connects it to this thing that there's an Einstein at one of these locations and he's moonwalking, right? And so that's a very memorable thing to remember.
Gotcha.
At the box.
I was just assuming it was like a time travel fictional bit about Michael Jackson and Albert Einstein.
Yes, no. So it's just and so this guy becomes a memory athlete.
Okay.
So he learns, he gets a coach, and he then enters one of the.
I can see that method of learning definitely working out. I know in Alzheimer's research, they say that it's the long-term memory that stays. So patients who have suffered from Alzheimer's disease, they can remember their childhood. They can remember things that happened so far back in the past, like it was yesterday. But then the things that literally happened yesterday just don't stick.
Yes.
So the fact that you mentioned childhood home, that I can see there being some truth to that.
Yeah, I think the idea is that it just is that's the part that's very fluent, right? You don't even have to think hard about the place you grew up and you just know every nook and cranny of that place.
Exactly.
And so on. Any case, it's a fantastic book, and it might be views. I don't know. Brandy, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And you now can say you're part of the Denver comedy elites who have been on this podcast.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, great. Cheers.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to visit petermcgraw.org for more information about our guest, show notes, and social media links. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share with others. Join Dr.